respected guests, dear friends, it's an honor to be here. And first, my heartiest congratulations to everyone who has been so successful at their studies. So, what I plan to, yeah, you can hear me now? Okay, so what I plan to do is essentially lay down what I think is the situation in the world today, which I hope will help you understand how Is it better? You want more? Now, better? Okay. So, essentially what I think the world is going through, which may help you take forward the challenges that face you in your life ahead. So this is essentially targeted at the students here and those who may have passed out over the past few years. I think the world is going through an interesting dynamic. It's very different from the world that we've seen in the last 30 or 40 years. There are three things that are striking about the world right now, or I should say actually four things. The first is that the world over the last 30 years has accumulated enormous amount of debt. In fact, even after the financial crisis, which was arguably caused by a lot of debt, the world has accumulated even more debt. So since 2008, we've managed to add another $57 trillion to our indebtedness, which is about 17 percentage points of global GDP. Today, global debt stands at a staggering 286 percentage points of GDP. And global GDP, as you know, is $77 trillion. So we have an enormous mountain of debt. Essentially, what this means is we have sold our future generation. So unfortunately, the people here who represent our future generation, your future is actually looking quite bleak, because the generation that just went by, which is the people sitting in the front, have sold it. Okay? That is what debt is, right? You're going to pay back all this money that your parents have accumulated as debt. Now, mind you, this doesn't apply to India, so it doesn't matter to this audience, but it matters to audiences outside this country, and I'll come to that in a moment. About the Indian situation, but the audiences outside this country, the young generation, are inheriting this mountain of debt that their parents have accumulated in trying to better their own current situation. They've basically sold their future. The other thing that the world faces is that it is aging, and it is aging very rapidly. It is no longer as young as it was 30 or 40 years ago. Take the case of Europe. The average person there is 50 years old. The average person in Japan is actually crossed the age of 50. The average Chinese is approaching the late 30s. The average American is a little younger, he's 37. And therefore, on the aggregate, the world is actually pretty old now compared to where it was 30 years ago. It's a consequence of having produced maybe less kids, longer lifespans. We are losing lesser number of children to death, and better medical facilities and a lot of other things that have happened over the last 30 years ensures that we are actually aging. And this has implications about how your lives may pan out over the next 20 or 30 years. And the third thing is that we have managed to build a lot of capacity around the world. Almost everything is oversupplied right now. So we are facing the prospects of deflation. And some of you may understand that. Essentially, in short, it means that prices in the world could decline. And that has got consequences. Now, the immediate thought that you may think is, the thought that comes to your mind immediately is that, well, very good, things are going to become cheaper. But human psychology, the way it works is that if JK sir told you that, I'm going to cut my fees, you'd say, okay, cut your fees, then I'll enroll myself. When prices fall, we tend to postpone consumption. The act of postponing consumption caused prices to fall even further. And then prices fall even more further, and then you postpone your consumption even further. And that leads to basically shrinking global output, shrinking quality of life. So this is what the world is faced with, what we call as the 3Ds: debt, demographics, deflation. Aging population, mountain of debt, and deflation. And just to put into context debt, because you are all chartered accountants, so you'll understand that very well. Global debt today is 3 times global output. So imagine you are assessing a company that has got an amount of debt which is 3 times its revenues, not equity, 3 times revenues. And if your profit margin is say 10%, that means 30 times your current income is your debt. So that company will spend a lifetime paying back that debt, because I'm not even counting the amount of interest that piles up every year. So that is the situation in the world today. Now India, fortunately, thanks to all these senior people sitting in front, is actually very different. So we have actually not accumulated debt over the last 30 years. We stand at the low end of the quantum of debt in the world. In fact, India's debt is about 130 or 140% of our GDP, which is about 1.3 or 1.4 times our output. Strikingly, our GDP is growing much faster than the rest of the world. So again, it's not such a big problem servicing that amount of debt. So you have to be thankful to your parents that they have not actually taken any debt. My father did not take any debt in his whole life. I have not taken any debt my whole life. And therefore, my next generation is actually inheriting a very clean balance sheet and therefore very good prospects. So we are actually very distinct from the rest of the world. The Chinese have accumulated 73% of their GDP as debt only in the last 7 years. The next generation of Chinese are very, very disadvantageously positioned than the next generation of Indians. Likewise Europe, likewise Japan, likewise the US. So we stand distinct. The second place where we stand separate, and I guess all of you know about it, is that we have a very young population. The median age of our population is about 25, which is just about the median age of the people out here in this group here. And that's how our country looks like. Senior citizens are just 10% of our population. And the bulk of our people are actually below the age of 35. In fact, right now we have 50 crore people in this country, 50 crore people who are below the age of 16. So they're all going to school. They're all going to be joining JKSC's classes in the next 10 years. He doesn't have a choice. He's not going to be able to retire because the number of students joining him is just going to expand. In fact, what he has seen in the last 30 years is nothing compared to what he will experience in the next 30 years in terms of number of people joining, various professional courses and classes. So we are very different from the rest of the world. While the average Chinese, the average Japanese, the average European is going to spend a lot of time taking care of elderly people, we are actually taking a lot of time caring younger people. It's very different. Now, of course, one disadvantage that arises out of this is that we're not left with that much extra money to consume. Your parents have to spend a lot of money on your education. And then they'll hope that when you get educated, you'll take care of them. And that's how they will redeem themselves. Right now, we are spending a lot of national resources on grooming these 50 crore kids for the next phase of their life. And when that happens, this country's prosperity will rise exponentially. And the third thing is, we don't have excess capacity in this country. If anything, we actually have shortage of capacity, which is why we face inflation all the time. So we are not faced with the prospects of declining prices. If anything, because the world is experiencing declining prices, it actually puts us at a slight advantage because the cost of fuel for India is declining. The cost of metals is declining. Some of these things we don't produce here. And that is going to be of great advantage to India. So actually India is very advantageously positioned. Even if we do nothing, we will still grow 6% every year. And that is going to be twice the global rate of growth, I think, because the world is struggling to grow at 3%. So if you look at the rankings of various countries in the world by output, we're ranked about 8th or 9th. We used to be outside the top 10, now we have risen. But if you look at it in terms of incremental share, what do we contribute to annual growth of world output? We are third. We're just behind US and China. And we will actually overtake, we will probably overtake both of them in the next 10, 12 years in terms of incremental output. Not in terms of aggregate output, we are still far away. India, as you know, is just about $2 trillion. China is at 10, America is at 20. So we're still far away from there. But in terms of what we will contribute to incremental output in the world, in the next 5, 7 years will become the largest. Now imagine all of you would have actually kicked off your professional career at that time. Some of you may have started off, some of you may have been in your career for 3 or 4 years. And imagine what that means for you. We did not have that advantage. For you, that's going to be an enormous advantage. The world will be looking at us to save the world. We will be the drivers of world output. Very different from the last 20 or 30 years. So it's an incredible moment in history compared to the last 200 or 300 years. India is on the verge of becoming a superpower. In your lifetime, I promise you, India will become a superpower. In my lifetime, it may not. But in your lifetime, and I'm addressing to the group which is just behind the first 2-3 rows, I think India will become a superpower. I tell my daughter that you will definitely see India as a superpower before you become a grandmother. But you know, that's how I think things could pan out. Now, everything cannot be taken for granted. Things can go wrong. For example, if we do not take care of our health, all these young people will become liability. And don't underestimate this, because actually the average Indian is not healthy. We have a very high level of disease burden. Our disease burden is about the same as the worst African countries in the world. And mind you, the African countries are much poorer than us. We have a large disease burden. Most of our diseases are infectious in nature, and they are caused by our own actions because we don't keep our environment clean, which is why I think, contrary to what other people think, the biggest agenda of this government has been the Swachh Bharat campaign, which I think is the most important agenda. If we can truly clean this country up, we will reduce our disease burden, our people will become healthier, and then they will be able to contribute more. But be careful, health is a factor. The other is skilling. Now it doesn't apply to this group because you are all skilled thanks to all the advice and guidance you get from JKSC classes. But not everybody in this country is as well endowed. They are not so skilled, and therefore that could be a risk factor. We need to skill our people to make sure that we can convert our demographic dividend into advantage, or rather it will then become a problem for us. So there are a few things to be done. You cannot take life for granted under any circumstances. There is another problem, or rather I should say a challenge that the world faces. I think the world is going through a unique revolution, and all of us are witnessing that revolution. We are lucky to be witnessing it. At the same time, it's going to be a challenge, and we need to rise to that occasion. About 10,000 years ago, the world went through its first revolution, which was known as the agricultural revolution. Homo sapiens learned how to grow food. Until then, they didn't know how to do it on a scale that could feed the world. So we were basically doing what is known as nomadic or sustenance farming. Each person grew for himself or basically hunted for his own food. We were the foragers. Then we suddenly discovered agriculture. And what happened was the agricultural revolution. We could scale up the production of food. That actually helped scale up mankind. That's how we rose to the top of the food chain in a very short span of time. It's costing the world dearly today because of that. We have created a big problem in terms of carbon footprint. But the agricultural revolution was the first revolution. Then came the scientific revolution. That happened about 500 years ago. It was caused by just this one simple phrase that Europeans had, which is, we don't know. The we don't know thing led to a massive discovery of things. I mean, you may know William Harvey was the guy who discovered that the heart pumps blood into the body. Until then, the common belief was that the stomach actually processed the blood. And when the question was asked, what did the heart do? Well, the heart actually did not have any role to play. Blood just passed through the heart and came out of it. And then when the question came, so what did the lungs do? Well, that's a redundant organ in the body, and if you removed it also, it would not make a difference. That was the understanding of the world of medicine only 500 years ago. William Harvey changed that, putting his own life at risk, and then discovered that the human body operated differently. Likewise, Copernicus, who discovered about the way the solar system is organized, or the fact that we discovered about plate boundaries and how the earth was formed. So a lot of scientific discoveries were made 500 years ago. That's what we call as the scientific revolution. Then about 250 years ago came the industrial revolution, when we actually were able to invent machines, and that completely altered the way the world actually processed things. Until then, things were made with hand. We had not actually learned how to scale up production. We had not invented transportation systems. And you know what the effect of that has been. The world has shrunk in size, and it has scaled up in terms of output, and the growth that we have experienced in the last 200 years has been phenomenal. Today we are going through the fourth revolution of the Homo sapien race, which all of us call as the technology revolution. Now this is not just about the internet. The internet is part of the technology revolution, but a lot of things are changing in the world, and changing very rapidly. And if you don't keep pace with that, you will find yourself lost. For example, and I'll give you an example outside the tech world, ball bearings, which are used for everything that moves, was a technology that was invented by Da Vinci. Yeah, Da Vinci, the painter. For 500 years, for the last 500 years, the technology for ball bearings is unchanged. There's a Japanese company called Q-Space, which has discovered a new technology, which you don't need retainers, you don't need lubricants. And imagine if that technology gets commercialized, a lot of ball bearing companies in the world will be out of business, a lot of lubricant companies will be out of business, and we'll be staring at something totally brand new which we are not ready for. And I could give you scores of such examples of technological changes that are happening. For example, in Japan, Japanese companies have moved from horizontal farming to vertical farming. So what we know of is growing crops on land, right? You put fertilizers, pesticides, you need soil, you need water. Japan now is scaling up vertical farming. You don't need soil. The plants grow on vertical walls. The roots are sprayed with fortified water. You don't need irrigation. You don't need pesticides, you don't need fertilizers. Guess what? You don't need sunlight. The plants are grown in artificial light. Photosynthesis happens with artificial light. Can you imagine? Food is grown without sunlight, without soil, without water, without fertilizers, without pesticides. What will that do to agriculture if it gets commercialized? So like this, there are massive technology changes happening. I think if you look at the agricultural revolution, it took 10,000 years. Scientific revolution took about 500 years. Industrial revolution took about 200 years. The coming technology revolution will take 50 years. It will be the shortest revolution, but probably the most dramatic one that we have experienced since we learned to read and write. And that is going to happen in your lifetime. Probably not in my lifetime, but certainly in your lifetime. So be prepared for it. So that's the world that you are facing. It's a world that's aging. It's a world that is laden with debt. It's a world that has got deflation problems. And it's a world that's experiencing a massive technology revolution. So it's a unique world. It's a challenging world. But I'm sure that you will learn how to overcome those challenges. So that was my perspective on the world. I was asked to speak about what you could do in your life, how you could organize your careers. Frankly, I don't understand much about what chartered accountants do, except that I know that they prepare financial statements of companies that I analyze. So I'm not going to delve into that. What I'm actually going to talk about is the 3 things that I made as mistakes in my life. And I know it's very hard to learn from your own mistakes, forget about learning from somebody else's mistakes, but I thought I'll just highlight the 3 mistakes that I made amongst the many other mistakes I made, which may help you when you set out to undertake your careers. So the first one is about understanding the impact of or the role of skill versus luck. We underestimate the role of luck in our lives. We constantly attribute our success to skill. It's my effort, I have done it, I put in the effort, I burned the midnight oil, I worked so hard, I studied 20 hours a day, and that's how I've got a rank. We constantly underestimate the role of luck. As a result, we are not prepared for failure. Now, how do you know what portion of your success is skill and what portion is luck? So I'm going to leave behind a maxim, a test, and you can use that test in various things. You can use that in your exam, you can use that in your job interview, you can use that test for making an investment, anything. So how do you know skill versus luck? If you can deliberately fail at what you are doing, then it is skill. If you cannot deliberately fail at what you are doing, then be sure that it is a lot of luck. Let me give you an example. Think about a carpenter who's making this table. It's very easy for him to fail. All he has to do is cut one leg short. The table will not stand on fours. It has failed. So the work of carpenter is 100% skill. He can deliberately fail at his task with great ease. Okay? Now think about Sachin Tendulkar trying to get out on the next ball. Okay, so Shane Warne is going to bowl and he's going to bat and he wants to get out on that ball because he wants to go back into the pavilion. Now the ball comes but it misses the stumps. So he can't leave it because if he leaves it he can't get out. So he swings his bat to lob a catch. But the fielder drops the catch. So he decides, let me get run out. So he goes and stands in the middle of the pitch. The fielder throws the ball, misses the stump, the ball crosses the boundary line. Despite the fact that he was trying to get out, he couldn't get out. Right? He could not fail deliberately. So there is an element of luck involved here. It is not 100% luck. There is still a lot of skill. Maybe it's 30% luck. So in the game of cricket, 70% skill, 30% luck. And that is why match fixing doesn't always work. Because what match fixers can't do is control the element of luck. They can control the skill portion, but they can't control the luck element. Now think about investing, or more appropriately think about trading. And I'm sure a lot of you out here trade stocks. Not invest, trade. Run an experiment for me. Build a trading portfolio which will definitely lose money in the next 3 months. Let me assure you, you try to lose money, you will end up making money. It will be the opposite result. The role of skill or the role of luck rises exponentially in that business. So now you have an easy way of ascertaining what is the role of skill, what is the role of luck. If you can fail deliberately at something, be sure that you have a lot of skill at work. If you can't fail deliberately, then there is an element of luck. When you appear for an examination, you can fail deliberately. There's a lot of skill at work. It is no point wishing anybody luck for an exam. It's 90% skill, just 5 or 10% luck. And the reason why there is also 5 and 10% luck is because you're not fully prepared. So, on contrary to popular perception, scoring well at an examination is not about luck, it's about skill, because you can deliberately fail at it. But scoring well in your portfolio of stocks is a lot of luck, not 100% skill. It's in fact a lot less skill, because it's very hard to deliberately fail in your investment. So that is one thing. The second thing is and I'm just talking about, just to give you a background, the 3 things that I have not done very well in my life. So one is not being able to understand the scope of luck versus skill. The second thing is to understand the impact of decisions. So when you're making decisions in life, usually we make a decision based on probability of success. And that is actually wrong guidance. What you should be making decisions on is based on the impact of your decision. If you make a decision, the probability of success may not be high, but in case it goes right, the impact may be large. So instead of focusing on the probability, focus on the impact. So just to give you an example, you may hang something outside your building or outside your balcony, say an iron ball, right? And you will assure me that don't worry, I have tied it very tight, it will not fall. But the event that it falls, and if it hits somebody on the head, that guy is dead. The impact of that is very large, even though the probability is small. Now we make decisions based on probabilities rather than impact. What you can do better, and your decision making will be a lot better if you make decisions on the basis of impact rather than probability. As human beings, we tend to underestimate probabilities very easily, and that is why we tend to err in our decisions. So when you're making decisions, when you're making the next decision in your life, think about what will be the consequences, not the probability of success. Because we'll underestimate the probability, but if we can estimate the consequence to be large, then it's a decision worth making, even if the probability is low. So that's the second thing. The third thing is conflating deep value with cheap valuation. Now this is a very stock market specific thing, but it can be used generally in life. So I'll give you an example using two stocks. State Bank of India as a stock trades at about 1 time book, and it looks very cheap. HDFC Bank trades at 4 times book, looks expensive. But actually HDFC Bank represents deeper value than SBI, because HDFC Bank has much more assured cash flows, has better growth prospects than SBI. And this is a mistake that we make every time. We go for something cheap, but not something valuable. What is cheap is not value, and what is value could be expensive, but is actually cheap. So when you're making a choice between value versus valuation, go for value, not valuation. Valuation is basically the price of something, or it's the cost of something, the price. I'll interchangeably use that. Whereas value is what it delivers to you. So these are the three things that I thought may be useful to you when you're making your career decisions. The role of skill versus luck, the impact of decision versus the probability of outcome, and the gap between deep value and cheap valuation. I was conversing with one of your professors earlier, and it struck me that there are two more things that I would like to share with you. And it also takes me back to JK sir's speech about math. So math is a very dear subject to me. I really have great affinity for math. And I also teach my daughter math. And she likes learning with me. She keeps telling me how I wish you taught my class. Because when I teach her maths, I don't teach her the sums that are there in the book. I actually teach her with a lot of history. So for example, when we learn Pythagoras Theorem, I actually teach her, how Pythagoras Theorem came about. And it goes back about 2,500 years ago. And what is the usefulness of Pythagoras Theorem? I mean, you would think that it is about solving triangles, right? But actually Pythagoras Theorem is the most important thing in ascertaining whether you're dealing with a plane or whether you're dealing with a curve. So the biggest usefulness of Pythagoras Theorem is to ascertain the curvature. If you have a triangle on a curvature, the Pythagoras Theorem will not work, because Pythagoras Theorem essentially works only on a plane. So it is the test for a curvature. So we don't learn all these things in school, unfortunately. But there are things that we learn in school. We learn trigonometry in school, and it's largely a redundant subject. The reason why we learn trigonometry in school is because 100 years ago, almost everybody in the world was mapping the world. And trigonometry was the tool that was used to map. Trigonometry is what made it possible for us to map the world. Without that, we would not have been able to map the world. And therefore, it was introduced in schools that everybody should learn how to solve trigonometric sums, because everybody at some stage will be involved in mapping the world. Now imagine in 2015, we don't need to map the world at all, because every nook and corner of the world has been mapped. And it's sitting in your pockets right now. Like, unlike, say, even 20 years ago when maps used to be in books and on posters and charts. So the utility of trigonometry is close to zero. But math is very important to you, I think, for success in life. And maybe because I'm a math student, I have that bias. So what is it about math that will become the predominant subject in the next, say, 50 years? And I told this to my daughter, that while you're learning trigo today because you're learning outdated math, and I told this to her only yesterday, your kids are not going to learn trigo. They are going to learn something else. So what is it that they're going to learn? And I think the next generation of students in math will basically be focused on probabilities. The role of chance has increased so much in the world because of the evolution that Homo sapiens have gone through, that probability will become the most important tool for people to be equipped with. So if you have spare time, and if you have any interest in math, in fact I'd say even if you don't have any interest in math, and I know it has nothing to do with your CA, please go and learn probability. It will help you tremendously in decision making, it will help you tremendously in the jobs that you do. In fact, I think the whole sphere of accounting may change. Probability will become a very important element in accounting in the next 20-30 years. So it will be a nice, decent tool to have in your back pocket. And the final thing which I want to say is that please don't make the mistake that the world has made. The Western world and even parts of the Eastern world have gone and sold their future. Our parents have not done that, and you please don't do it. I see this rising trend amongst youngsters today to borrow money because they want a better life today, and that's the best way you can do it, is you borrow money, you take a loan, buy a big car, take a loan, buy a big house. I can tell you it's not a strategy that's going to work. If you sell your future, you have sold it. And it's not going to improve your life as you think it will. So don't get caught up with this philosophy of taking debt. I'm sure JK sir has not taken any debt in his life. He bought his house when he could afford it. I did the same thing, thankfully, because of the values that were passed on by my parents. And I encourage you also to do the same thing. Please don't take debt. The only debt that I have in my life is my credit card bill, and it's not because I want to borrow money, it's only a convenience. So I paid every month at the end of each month whenever the payment date comes. Otherwise, I have no debt in my life, and I would encourage you also not to have debt. It's the best way to live. Yes, you may want a bigger house, you will get it, okay, out of your income. So that's a somber note to end the speech, but those are the few thoughts that I wanted to share with you. They're not necessarily all connected with each other. It's a very interesting world that you are in. It's a world that has made a lot of mistakes, is now looking at a pretty grim future for its current generation. But India seems different. You people are lucky that you are in India, and you are actually at a moment where I think India is about to ascend, and over the next few decades become a superpower. And I think if you can resist the temptation of taking debt, we should surely see a very bright future. So thank you very much, and have a great career ahead.